وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. I have recited a surah, I think, which almost everyone knows by heart, and it is the one surah which I think also after the surah Fatiha every child learns. Now, what is the significance of this particular surah? This surah occurs at the end of the Holy Quran, being the 112th surah, followed by 113 and 14. So like any other well-written document, there has to be an introduction to the document. Then there has to be what is called the body of the document, which explains the introduction. And then finally there has to be a take-home message. So in the case of the Holy Quran, of course, the introduction is obviously the Surah Fatiha. And then the whole corpus of the Holy Quran after that explains the meaning actually of the Surah Fatiha. And that is why we say that the whole of Islam or the Quran is encapsulated in the Surah Fatiha. And this in turn is then encapsulated in the Rahmah of Allah Ta'ala, in the Rahman and Rahim. So now we come to the end of the Holy Quran, and there are actually 4 of these chapters which begin with the word Kul. And I'll come to the significance of the word Kul in that too, but the take-home message in the first one, which is Surah Kafirun, is that finally, after all is said and done, and one has pursued the Holy Quran fully, then one comes to the fact that you do not follow what I follow, and you do not follow, and I do not follow what you follow. That is the basis, the basic message of this particular surah. This, of course, then, what is it then which has to be followed then? What do we look at the Holy Quran? So first of all, it says in the verse 1, say He, Allah, is one. Now, the construction of this verse actually by itself, tells the whole story. And the words which are used have a particular meaning also. First of all, it is that Kul huwallah, so He, Allah. So at once, as the Holy Quran always does, it engages the reader's intellect. This is a particular quality of the Holy Quran, a characteristic of the Holy Quran, that it always appeals to reason when it comes to convincing a person of the attributes of Allah or anything about religion which may occur. So then He, of course, is then pointing towards Allah Ta'ala. And up here I would say that in is one. So I will now also take up the word one too. The Holy Quran could have said simply Wahidun, which also means one. But why did it use the comparative Ahad? Because like we do not say Allahu Kabirun, we say Allahu Akbar. There's a reason. Akbar means greater than. So if you have any problems, you have any opposition, you have any sort of difficulty, Allah Ta'ala is greater than that difficulty. In the same way, the word used is Ahad, meaning that He is one. But in what way is He one? He is one not only in the sense of numerically being one, anything can be one numerically, but Ahad means that His being does not admit any association with Him. which will be 1 plus something. So in this case then, in the attributes of Allah Ta'ala, in his the one attribute which is specially singled out by the Holy Quran is that attribute of Rahmah. We always start anything with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which does not mean just simply in the name of Her Majesty or something like that, but which actually the ba here or the bay stands actually for the assistance. So the meaning is more with the assistance of Allah Ta'ala. So whenever you do anything, as soon as you take the word Bismillah, then automatically what you do becomes greater in value, because now Allah Ta'ala is your partner. And so even it may be the meanest of the jobs, but if Allah Ta'ala is your partner, then you will do it well, and you will do it out of the goodness of the heart. And what is meant by the goodness of the heart? That is the Rahmah of Allah. Rahmah is translated as mercy, I think, by nearly all translators. But it means, as Maulana Muhammad Ali says in his commentary on the Holy Quran, it means much more. It means to have so much love and tenderness for something that you are compelled to do good to it. And Allah Ta'ala then makes this his prime attribute by saying not once only but twice in the Holy Quran that I have made the attribute of mercy binding upon myself. Meaning it is almost like Allah Ta'ala taking an oath that I will be good to my creation out of love for it. And this sense then makes the benchmark for all Muslims, that besides trying to emulate the other divine attributes within us, this attitude towards the rest of humanity or to the rest of creation should be the same, that you do good to it out of love for it. And then, of course, in the case of the Holy Prophet is what he did, and that is why he had so much success. But we'll come to that later also. So now, why is this so important, his unity? The reason why, of course, he has created us, as he says in the Holy Quran, I have not created man except to have mercy on him. So mercy or rahmah on him. And the greatest good that can be done to anybody would be to give him everlasting life. A life forever without any pain, in complete peace and happiness with Allah Ta'ala in the hereafter. So it is, these attributes, of course, are present in us, but they are present in a seed form. They are not the fully developed attributes of Allah Ta'ala. As it says in the Holy Quran, so He, that is God, reveals to it its way of evil, talking about the soul, and its way of good. He is indeed successful who causes it to grow. Here's the analogy with the seed now. Now it is interesting that zakaha means not only to make it grow, but also to purify something is zakaha too. So he who purifies it is successful, and he indeed fails who buries it. Meaning you don't give it any spiritual water, you don't give it any spiritual light, and that seed is never going to germinate. So now we come to the word ilah, because you are told kul huwallahu ahad. Now the ilha is I think described by Hazrat Mirza Sahib as the entity or being who is worthy of being called ilah must possess the following attributes, which is he must be worthy of being worshipped or complete with complete humility. So mabud. Next one would be matlub. He is the only one worthy to be searched of, because what you can get out from him. Then he must be maqsood, the only one worthy for being the reason of one's existence. That in every thing we do, in every deed we perform, it is to be for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. then he must be the mehboob, the one who is worthy to be the object of one's love, and therefore it requires complete, let's say, infinite perfection and infinite beauty. And that reminds me of one verse by a very great lady, Waliullah, who is Hazrat Rabia, and it's a very famous quote. I'm sure you've all heard it before, that if I worship you for the sake of heaven, then deny me heaven. If I worship you for the sake of, for the fear of hell, then cast me into it. But if I worship you for your goodness, then do not withhold your beauty from me. So this should again be the true, love for Allah Ta'ala. Now, this chapter is therefore called Ikhlas, which means, of course, the purification of a thing from dross or impurities. So then it means that the purification of our journey or of our knowledge to God or of our behavior, which we, do, the deeds that we do, they must not have any other admixture with them, except that we should be at that point looking only at the perfection and the infinite beauty of Allah Ta'ala. So, which then of course comes to the next question, which would be then what are the things which keep us away from Allah Ta'ala? And this, of course, the Holy Quran again addresses in minute detail. First of all, it takes up the idea of idolatry or worship of objects such as stones or animals. These cannot teach us anything about high moral qualities. You are not going to develop any spirituality by looking at a stone or asking a stone to do something for you. It's a stone after all. And then, of course, animals, and this is not something which is just theoretical, it is actually practical. There are, close to 1 billion people in India, and a large percentage of them, they do regard the cow really as a god. So then what can a cow teach you? It may give you some good milk, maybe, but it can't teach you anything. And other things it can teach you how to eat, which we all do anyway, and sometimes too much. And then, of course, then you have the call of nature, so that is not going to help you in any way. The other thing, which, of course, is the worship of the forces of nature. So just because these forces are obviously powerful, like the sun, the moon, the wind, etc., so there's a natural tendency for man to bow his head before something he feels is more powerful than him. But again, these themselves cannot teach you about high moral attributes. In fact, it's the opposite. Both in the objects of nature which one takes as God, and in the forces of nature, actually you have the ability through your intellect to take these forces, to subdue them or to harness them for your own benefit. So if you're going to worship them, then of course, or regard them as God, then it is a demeaning of a person. And your intellectual ability then also will suffer too. And hence both your spiritual and your intellectual level then will remain at a very low level. The third one is, of course, the worship of human beings as God. Understandable in one way, because in a way the great Waliullah or a prophet or a saint is, quote, in Sufi terms, is reflecting God. So the reflection of God, we all know that, especially those who know something about Sufism. And but everybody dies. All these saints, all these so-called gods have died, and the Quran speaks about them. Dead they are, not living. They are all mata. They've gone, they died. So obviously they cannot do anything at that point to bring you out of, let's say, the clutches of sin towards virtue. this can only be done by the Maker himself. So the other one is another one is the blind following of a religious or political leader. And the blind following of a religious leaders are of course referred to in the Holy Quran when it says that they have taken their rabbis and their priests for God besides, or for Lord, you see, not God but for Lord besides Allah. So up here, of course, one of the companions of the Holy Prophet said that, but O Messenger of Allah, who was a person from the people of the book, that he said, but we never used to worship our priests. So the Holy Prophet said that, but didn't you obey them blindly in whatever they taught you? And unfortunately, this type of shirk especially is now present among the Muslims themselves, and is a cause of all the problems actually which are occurring in the Muslim world. So in the same way, people follow political leaders too, who are clearly taking them, down to ruin, but somehow this adoration of a person just because he's in a high position or has that special charisma, so he is able to sway them. And the biggest example of that would be Hitler and the German nation, and for which, of course, everybody suffered. So then now we come, so it says, Kul huwallahu ahad. Now what does the word Kul means? It doesn't simply mean say with the tongue, as we all know, and I'm sure you've read the tafsirs of our Holy Qurans. Kul also means any action that you perform. So Kul huwallahu ahad means that say it with your behavior, what we call zaban-e-hal. So it doesn't say, so therefore you don't bow your head before an idol, you don't bow your head before the forces of nature, you don't follow any religious or political leaders blindly. And then of course the last one and the greatest one of all is, have you seen him who sees his low desires for a God, who takes his low desires for a God? And this of course is the prime God which stands, because everybody is now disillusioned with leaders. That's for sure, many are. So they've gone by the wayside even, especially in Britain, I think. We still have one person there who's still regarded almost as not quite God but close to him. But anyway, but this is of course the instrument which the Dajjal uses. And of course, I think nobody is immune from this. Even if we look at our social gatherings many times, and one can see things which are clearly not allowed by the Holy Quran happening there. But unfortunately, that's the truth. And one of the things that the Holy Prophet had said, that, for instance, like that there will be a dancing girl in every house. And nobody knew how are you going to support her, who's going to feed her. But now you just switch on the TV and you have 1,000 dancing girls there in your house. And even among the most, let's say, families of pious people also, who truly themselves may not ascribe to this type of behavior, but the household does. And you can't control everybody in the household. So this is something which one has to be, which the Quran actually then takes care of each one of these by identifying them. And then of course in Kul, in the word of following this, of course, comes the role of the Holy Prophet. That in a society which had all these ills before, whether it was, worshipping inanimate objects, worshipping nature, following leaders blindly, and of course following one's low desires, each one of them was there. But right from the very beginning of his life, as a young man, later on as a married man, then as a prophet, then as a persecuted prophet, then as a commander of an army, a legislator, a leader of a nation, in all of these, so that one of the I think the authors, English authors, had written a book about him. His name escapes me, but he said something to the effect that never have the circumstances of a man changed so much, and he has changed so little to meet them. So, Al-Amin as a young man, Al-Amin as a persecuted prophet, Al-Amin as a victorious leader, and Al-Amin right to the point of his death. So, and this is then, of course, we have an example which is given to us in the minutest detail. Who has volumes of personal details written in any book? No one. Even if we take our fathers, for instance, do you know what your dad did during his own life? We don't know. We know a certain part of it, but we do not know much of it. And of course, in other leaders and all that stuff, they hide a lot. They cannot serve as examples. But his every action as a human being has been written down for posterity forever, and therefore he is in that way the living Quran, and of course the mercy to mankind, or Rahmah to all that. So now I'll quickly go through the other verses, otherwise the sermon will become too long. Allah is He on whom all depend. Now there is only one law in the universe, so that you can't depend on two things. You can only depend on one thing. That is the law of Allah Ta'ala. And not only that, but a great scientist once said that the universe cannot exist unless it exists in a universal mind, because everything, the hair on your head can be traced back theoretically to the Big Bang. So Big Bang comes the subatomic particles, from them comes the protons and the neutrons, from them are formed the elements, from them are formed the molecules, from them is formed the water. And the Holy Quran refers to it beautifully in one verse, where it says that the heavens and the earth were closed up, and then He rent them apart, and then the magisterial sweep, and we have created every living thing from water, meaning that is connected with the creation of water to the creation of life on earth. So these kind of things mean that everything is dependent upon the law of this being. He begets not, nor is He begotten. Up here, I think the greatest, let's say, threat to religion or to spirituality is actually the theory of atonement of sins in Christianity. And that, of course, requires that God have a son, because from the pagan source from which this atonement of sins was taken is that God cannot forgive. So it's a big defect or an insult to God that He is who is the author of I and you can forgive each other, but He cannot. Okay, then so it also shows, as Hazrat Mirza Sahib has very nicely, he's said all this in his book, that the 4 questions answered. He does it beautifully, but he says it that they don't recognize what the nature of sin is. It's not a brick you can transfer from a person to one person. It's something which is the condition of the soul, and you may transfer a condition of the soul. If I'm a thief and I make you a thief, yes, then I transfer my condition to you. But it's not a brick which you can easily put on somebody's head. And then his son, of course, comes there, but he goes to hell only for 3 days, purgatory for 3 days. But the rest of humanity, even they have done good, their whole life will go to hell forever. So what kind of justice is this? So how can you call Him so just that He can't forgive, and then He does this? So there are so many holes you can poke into this theory, and this really turns off many Christians as well. And we can point this out in a nice way and bring people to the message of Islam. And then and none is like Him, of course. This then encapsulates the whole thing, that nothing can be done except by one God, one law, one way of spirituality. That is by developing the attributes in oneself, by doing good, and this is the only way that you can come close to God, and whose forgiveness is extreme. That is the hope for most of mankind, that He forgives sins, as He says, He forgives sins altogether, jami'an. And that is what we all hope and pray for. And we also pray that Allah Ta'ala grants us the wisdom and of recognizing what His unity is, and the wisdom and the strength then to follow that. And it especially refers to our Jamaat. But it is the literature and the translations of the Holy Quran which have all been inspired by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the Mujaddid of the age, which will bring about this change, inshallah. And although it may seem like mountains, how can you move a mountain? But the Holy Quran can move a mountain. It moved Hazrat Umar anyway, and he conquered 2 empires at the same time, at one time. So may Allah Ta'ala all have mercy on us. Alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Allahumma ansur man nasara dina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wajalna minhum. Allahumma khzul man khazala dina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ولا تجلنا منهم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون عباد الله اذكروا الله يذكركم ودعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر.